I would like to welcome everybody and convene the special meeting of the board for Thursday, May 26, 2022 at 3 p.m. and recognize County Manager Mark Watson, manager, for his presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Commissioners, I am happy to present to you my FY 2022-23 recommended budget. In previous years, we have worked, as in previous years, we have worked this year to provide a budget that is reasonable, transparent, and sustainable. There are limited enhancements included in the budget with a focus on our core functions in public safety and critical human service programs, as well as with our education partners. My recommended budget maintains the current tax rate of 58.80. With a strong focus on financial stewardship and a commitment to maintaining a sustainable financial position for our organization in a time when inflation is at a generational high, my budget is based on an assessed value that has an estimated growth at 3.5% and a sales tax that is budgeted at 26.4% over the FY22 budget amount, or 9.6% above anticipated actuals for the current fiscal year. When looking at revenue estimates that have been used for the recommended budget, you will see that we've taken lessons that we've learned from the past 2 years and have been more aggressive in the budget calculation. Almost every part of North Carolina has anticipated or experienced unanticipated levels of growth in sales tax over the past 2 years, and Union County is no different. We continue to be cautious regarding the future growth we will see in sales tax, and we continue to monitor inflation and its impacts on our operation. My recommended budget is based on a sound, physically responsible approach, taking into account staff recommendations and external guidance for local governments. The county expense budget, less EMS, South Piedmont Community College, Union County Public Schools, is increasing by 1.4%. This recommended budget maintains our commitment to the most important resource we have, our employees. My recommendation continues our long-standing pay-for-performance strategy and continues our investment in the benefits program. Each year during the budgeting process, we review the cost of health insurance programs as well as the sustainability of the program and its value and the value it provides. Due to the rising cost of medical care, the premium amount paid by eligible employees, retirees, and their covered dependents will increase beginning July 1. We have worked hard to minimize the impact on our employees and feel this increase works to maintain the sustainability of the program with employees and retirees participating in that sustainability. We have renewed our focus on information technology system security and the integrity of our information technology systems. The recommended budget includes investments for ensuring that our information technology system is up to date, secure, and appropriately flexible for the types of unexpected situations that test our business continuity processes and the different service delivery methods that we are responsible for. While every resident in Union County is served by an individual fire district, fire service is a very much a collaborative working relationship. The fire departments of Union County not only work closely with each other, they work extremely close with the county's emergency services department. The recommended fire department budgets reflect a continued investment in personnel and capital needs. We have worked very hard to address the need for both the personnel and the capital. Our residents have seen the benefit of this through increased availability of trained personnel, lower ISO ratings, more reliable apparatus, and modernized equipment. As we look forward into the future of our EMS medical services operations, I've included $500,000 for additional compensation, as well as $1 million for capital investments. We have undertaken a comprehensive review and assessment of the current EMS deployment model and operations in order to ensure the highest levels of service and the most effective use of these allocated funds. This increase in funds represents a strong commitment and is 19.76% more than the FY22 adopted budget. I'm recommending investments in the Sheriff's Office that are important to the overall management of that office as well as to the safety of our community. There are enhancements recommended for additional staff that will provide service in the Indian Trail Office, as well as a new sergeant's position to maintain and manage our canine handling officers. There are modest increases included to ensure that the move to the new Sheriff's Administrative Building is both adequate and appropriate. In our Human Services area, I am recommending enhancements that strengthen the core programming that is important to the children and families in our community. The average number of children that our child welfare staff are engaged with has increased by 47% in the past 3.5 years. While volume in this area is an issue, the cases are also increasingly complex. I am recommending additional staff to this area to ensure that we are staffed appropriately and that our caseloads are manageable. In the area of public health, I'm recommending an additional dental hygienist position to ensure that our dental clinic is operating at an optimal level. The demand for the county's dental care services has remained high, with the current schedule booked out 3 months in advance and a waiting list of residents seeking dental services. The current hygienist sees 5 to 6 patients per day. A second hygienist will allow an average of 10 patients per day. Additionally, I'm recommending an additional public health nurse to coordinate care for inmates in our jail health program. This program is vitally important to our jail operations. As you are aware, we have new facilities coming online during the upcoming fiscal year: the Sheriff's Administrative Building, the Emergency Services Complex, the office renovations at our Progress Building, and the renovations and expansion of the Board of Elections. These facilities will offer our organization enhanced capabilities for serving the residents of Union County. An additional $546,000 is included in my budget recommendation for opening and maintaining these new facilities. In addition, funding for staffing is also included for the new Southwest Regional Library that will be opening in 2024. The diminishing number of experienced tradesmen willing to leave the private sector in order to become qualified inspectors for the Building Code Enforcement Division has created a shift in the makeup of our potential workforce and has forced us to reconsider our recruitment process. For the first time, building code enforcement will be utilizing candidates who may not have long-tenured construction experience, but otherwise are strong potential employees. The expectation of the apprenticeship program will allow a trainee to be partnered with a senior inspector, and in doing so, we will develop our future inspectors internally. As you recall, this topic was first presented to you by our building code director, Mr. Mark Griffin, in his presentation to you several weeks ago. It is anticipated that we will seek 4 employees for this program. However, only 2 will be hired initially. One of the initial hires will concentrate on a new type of inspection certification recently introduced by the Department of Insurance. This HVAC change-out inspector will only perform HVAC replacements, which are currently being performed by our electrical inspectors. The second employee will be partnered with a senior building inspector for training. The last 2 hires may be staggered to reduce the burden on staff to perform the required training of these apprentices all at the same time. Union County Building Code Enforcement remains dedicated to providing quality customer service in a timely manner. This initiative will assist in providing that service and is critical due to the high number of inspectors eligible for retirement in the very near future. My recommendation includes funding for our education partners that we believe is important to the continued success of their operations. While I am not able to include funding for either organization's entire request, I am making recommendations that I believe fit into the model of physical sustainability that we are striving to achieve. For South Piedmont Community College, my recommendation includes a modest increase for SPCC that equates to 3.5% growth we anticipate in our property tax base, or $107,685. Our operational capital budget continues to provide the $375,000 for operational capital expenses that SPCC has throughout the year. My recommendation for Union County Public Schools is $136,572,468. This is an increase of 5.03% over the FY22 budget, or an additional $6,544,434. This funding recommendation comes in 2 parts. $19,122,311 is recommended for UCPS operational capital needs, and $117,450,157 is recommended for their operational budget. This increase will allow for fully funding the $2 million in teacher salary supplement that was approved as part of the FY22 budget, as well as additional operational expenses of $3 million. UCPS will have the flexibility to use these funds for priorities that they select. Investment in our community partners is important to the overall well-being of our community. For the 3rd year, staff employed a competitive application process for community organizations to participate in. We have a review team made up of staff who thoroughly review and score the projects. This year, I'm recommending new partnerships with the following organizations: the Arc of Union and Cabarrus Counties. The program A Life Like Yours program advocates for inclusion of those living with intellectual and developmental disabilities. New Covenant Community Development Center, development of a science, technology, engineering, arts, and mathematics program to increase opportunities for lifelong success for youth. And the Humane Society, to expand low-cost spay and neuter services And lastly, the Union County Crisis Assistance Ministry Crisis Intervention Program assists individuals and families experiencing short-term financial difficulty to prevent homelessness. The increased funding in this area is $89,000. In closing, I want to thank our budget, financial, and tax teams for their work in helping prepare this recommended budget, as well as all of the department directors and the management team for the thoughtful way they developed their request. I'm confident that these requests and the items that I have included in my recommendation are mission critical and will serve to benefit all of the residents of Union County. With that, Mr. Chairman, that is my budget message. We now have Mr. Blake Hart, who will come and provide you with an overview and synopsis of some of the specific financials. I would mention that in your June 6th meeting, there will be a much more detailed presentation by Mr. Hart. So I'll turn it over to Blake at this time.
Thank you, Manager Watson, Chairman Rape, and members of the County Commission. I appreciate the opportunity to stand before you today and talk about the FY23 Union County budget. Let's see. Here we go. Okay. Well, the first thing that we do when we build a budget is to do a thorough estimation of revenues. We need to see how much revenue we're going to have coming in, and then pair that with the amount of expense that we can reasonably afford in that year based on the priorities and services that the board gives us to work with. The slide you see in front of you regarding assessed valuation shows the property valuation from FY20 through FY23. You'll see in the last column on the right, the cumulative change in total valuation is 3.5%, as Manager Watson mentioned. You also see the first row in the orange is listed as a net yield of 1 cent. That's the penny value. You'll see the penny value has increased from 2.7 million to about 2.8 million to 3.6 million last year, up to 3.728 million this year. And again, that's a 3.5% increase. And again, we have this budget is being based and built on a no tax rate increase budget. I wanted to show you here a high-level overview of county revenues, general fund revenues. You'll see the top line there is the ad valorem tax and fees. That relates to the slide we just saw. And you'll see on the far right column, the change column, that is expected to increase by 3.5% also. Ad valorem is our largest revenue source, and we spend a lot of time estimating what we believe that'll be. This reflects a strong real estate market and increasing migration in Union County. The next line you'll see is local option sales tax. We spent a lot of time talking about sales tax over the past really 2 years, but you'll see the increase there that's being projected for FY23 is 26.4%. That's a high number. When we spoke, when I had the opportunity to present to you a couple weeks ago, for the end of year projection, we talked about the reasons why the sales tax has increased. This is something that we're experiencing in Union County and across the state, and I believe across the nation as well. It's several factors are culminating to cause this. One is the infusion of the federal stimulus funds. Number two is the change in the law to allow the state to collect sales taxes on online purchases, and then during the pandemic, people began shopping in a higher proportion online, and so that's kind of been the level set for sales tax to increase that amount through FY22. And you'll see one of my bullet points says that the FY22 actuals are expected to be 9.7% higher than the FY21 actuals, and between 15 and 20% higher than the FY22 budget. And actually, the FY21 actuals came in above or in excess of the FY21 budget, and so that's playing into those numbers being larger there. If we end this year between 15 and 20% over budget or above budget, then we've applied a 3.75% growth rate for FY23, and that's to understand that the large swings in growth are probably over in FY22, and that we're going to move towards a more reasonable growth rate in 23 and onward. And if we go back to pre-COVID periods, the average growth rate in sales tax for Union County was between 3 to 4 to 7% in that range. And so the 3.75% growth rate for 23 is right in there. And also it's in line with the information we've received from the North Carolina Department of Revenue, from the League of Municipalities, from the NCACC, and also from the UNC Charlotte. Belk School of Business does a really thorough projection quarterly, and so kind of putting all those data points together, that's where we've landed for next year. You'll also notice that the intergovernmental revenues are increasing. That's due to the Medicaid hold harmless payment that we talked about a few weeks ago. That has increased $2.85 million. So next year there's an increase there, a modest increase based on that. If you look at the bottom right corner, you'll see that overall the revenues for the general fund are estimated to increase about 2.9% as a whole. And that's in comparison to in FY22, revenues grew by over 8.5%, and that was due to the appropriation of fund balance in FY22 that we used to fund one-time expenses and some capital. And that's coming off the COVID year when the general fund, I believe, grew by 1%. And so there's been some changes there, but we're back to a normal growth rate of about 3%. This is a high-level view of all of the county expenses. You'll see the top line on that table there is payments to outside organizations. That's the funding that the county provides for Union County Public Schools and SPCC and EMS. And as an average there, you'll see that's proposed to grow about 6%. You'll also see the next line, employee compensation. As the County Manager Watson mentioned, this budget includes a 3% merit increase for pay for performance. Also, the second year of funding the class and comp adjustment that was implemented in FY22 is included. That's just under $1 million. And then annualizing the enhancement positions from FY22 that were funded through the mid-year. When we fund those for a full year next year, that's going to be about another $825,000. In this budget, OPEB is funded. There's an increase for the county employee health benefits fund to stabilize the fund and strengthen it to make sure that it is substantial and meaningful in perpetuity for county employees and their families. Also, there was an increase to the required retirement contribution to the pension fund from 11.3 to 12.1%. You'll see in the operating costs, there's an increase of about $500,000 to fund newly opened facilities. We're in the process of opening the Emergency Communications Center and also the Sheriff Administration Building. And the cost of doing that in FY23 is about $550,000. Fuel has been on everyone's mind. We are budgeting. We've done a lot of work in this area. We are estimating that the county will use over 450,000 gallons of fuel in FY23, and we're estimating an average cost per gallon for the entire fiscal year of $4.75, and that would require an increase of just over $1 million, or it works out to be 121% of the total budget for fuel for the general fund. The budget in FY22 is just under $900,000, and so this is more than doubling that budget in FY23 to account for any continued increase in fuel or any disruptions in service that may be ahead of us. There's also increases in software of about $1.1 million and utilities of over $300,000, and I believe that's about a 10% increase in utility cost. If you look at the table, you'll see on the operating cost line, the general increase in operational expenses is higher than it normally would be, and the big chunks are the ones I just talked about, but averaging it's about 9%. So I feel pretty good about that since we've seen the inflation estimates Most recently, we're 8.3% of general inflation from the CPI that we're experiencing. So I think we're right in line there with what we're seeing nationwide. And hopefully the next report we're going to get in a few weeks, that'll start to come down or at least stabilize, but we'll see. And just to remind everyone that when we began the budget process, the county manager required each department to reduce their operating budget by 2% as a way to mitigate cost and reduce expenses going forward before we even begin to discuss or consider any enhancements. Now I want to talk about the volunteer fire departments. You'll see these are two tables split in half just because there's so many volunteer fire districts. There's 18 in total. On the left of each table, you'll see the value of a penny. Then you'll see the FY22 adopted local tax rate, and then you'll see the FY23 proposed tax rate and the change of those tax rates. Manager Watson went through that in some detail. The fluctuations are relatively minor. There are some that are decreasing, and if that's the case, it's mostly because just as the county general fund has experienced an increase in sales tax collections, these volunteer fire department districts also receive sales tax, so they've collected an abundance of sales tax, and that's caused if their expenses did not increase proportionally, then that would cause a decrease in their tax rate. And the ones that have gone up, that's mostly because those districts are adding firefighters to meet the demand of their areas, or they're taking on more debt to replace old fire trucks or old water tanks or other apparatus, and also in some cases to consider debt to replace firehouses that are 50, 60 years old that the bays are so small you can't fit a modern fire truck in them. So, and all the detail for each of the districts is in your budget book. Behind the fire departments tab, you can see all the detail you'd like to regarding fire departments. And next we'll move on to education. And again, this is just a recap of of Union County Public Schools' request. What was submitted as a request to the county manager. You'll see the points as listed. On the left side is the operating request as received. On the right side is the capital request, the PAYGO capital request as received. And you'll see at the bottom on the left side the requested increase over the prior year on the operating side was $12.4 million. And that worked out to about a 13% increase over prior year funding. And on the right is $4.8 million increase for the PAYGO capital that was submitted. This is a table that combines SPCC and UCPS funding, some historical funding from FY21 and 22. Then you'll see in the middle the FY23 requested column, and then you'll see the FY23 proposed column to see the comparison of what was submitted as a request and what is being proposed by the county manager for approval to the board. You'll see the SPCC direct funding, that's their operational funding, is being proposed to increase by 3.5%. And again, that's tied to the expected increase of the value of a penny in Union County this year. Their debt service, we don't have control over funding debt service. By statute, if there's debt, we have to pay for it, and so that's increasing by 10% for SPCC. The next one is UCPS operational funding. That's is going to grow by 5%, and again, that's broken into two pieces. One is the $2 million to annualize their class and comp adjustments that they did last year. That'll go into next year as well. And then the next portion of that is a 3.5% increase, again, which is tied to the average increase of county valuation in FY23. And then debt service for UCPS is going to decrease a little bit just based on the rate at which we've been paying down debt service. And the bottom line there is just a bullet point that gives some scale of the debt related to education. The amount of debt payments that the county is going to make this year is about $48 million, and 15% of that is dedicated to county projects, county-specific projects. 77% of that is dedicated to UCPS projects, and then about 8% is dedicated to SPCC projects, just to provide some scale there. And this is another high-level view of the operating and a budget which includes debt service by function. You'll see the first level there is economic and physical development at 2% of the total general fund budget is dedicated to that function. Cultural and recreational, which is parks and recs and libraries, about 2.5% of the total general fund budget is dedicated to that. General government, 13.6, and then of course human services more. Public safety is about 18%, and then just for scale, right at half the county budget, when you consider operations and debt, is occupied by education services, which is UCPS and SPCC together. Then this is a look only at debt service. Again, the total debt service for the general fund in FY23 is just under $49 million. And again, you'll see cultural and recreational is a 2.5% of those debt service payments will be dedicated to library and park and rec projects, 3.7% for economic development, 4% for general government, 8% for public safety, and about 82% for SPCC and UCPS projects combined. And that's the high-level view that I have for you today. As Manager Watson said, I'll have some more detail for you on the 6th. And again, we have the public hearing scheduled for the 6th with budget adoption hopefully on June 13th. We have information available on the county website for anyone that's watching at home or online. They can go there and link into the copy of the proposed budget book and all the reference materials that we have today, and of course the social media portals that we regularly use. And again, I'd like to also say thank you to our county tax assessor's office, the county clerk's office, all the county department directors and their staff, IT team, county management, and county finance director, and to the members of the board also. And then of course our budget team, which I will very honestly say we have the best budget team in North Carolina, and they do a great job, and it's a great pleasure to be part of this team. So that's all I have for today, and I'll be happy to respond to any questions you may have.
Any questions? Commissioner Helms.
Blake, we're seeing a downturn, people spending in restaurants, driving. I mean, it's getting worse by the day. That can have a negative impact on sales tax. Was that taken into consideration?
It was. We looked at lots of factors. One of the factors I think that we looked at is when looking at the making estimates each year, I'll take ownership of it. I've been a little too conservative each year based on what's happened. And so the estimate that is put before you is not, I would say it's kind of an intermediate estimate. There's a conservative estimate that would have been even less than this, and then there's one that could go up to closer to 30% that I think would be, I wouldn't feel comfortable going that high. But I do think that the way that the sales tax has changed and the way that people's consumption patterns, I think it's reasonable. But again, I don't want to underestimate that revenue again next year. But I do understand, I consider with inflation and the way that the market is turning, that is a possibility. I think we would still be on safe ground if that were to happen.
Any other questions or comments? Commissioner Rushing.
Thank you. Blake, you said last year we had 8.5% growth in revenues, and then it looks like prior years we had about that 2.93% growth, and then this year you're looking at 2.9% growth, correct?
So the growth in total revenues for the general fund, I believe coming out of the pandemic, it was closer to 1% for general fund, but it was limited.
Okay, and then, but overall revenues, we had an 8.5% growth, and then I would assume that would be the same for expenses as well, 8.5% growth in expenses last year?
Yeah, and that revenue amount was driven by the fund balance appropriation that we used. Mm-hmm. We used quite a bit higher amount of fund balance to fund the operating budget, more than we would normally because we had it on hand.
Because we had what?
Because we had available fund balance to use.
Right, we had over the 20%.
Yes.
Yes, so we took, just to get back to the 20%, we spent that extra fund balance that we had.
We did.
But 8.5% growth in spending last year, 8.5% growth in revenue. And we're looking at a 2.9% this year.
Mhm.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
thank you. Blake, when you talk about increases in the last fiscal year, 8.5%, those are nominal increases, right? Absolute increases? So in other words, if inflation's running, I think the last figure was about 8.5%. The real increase would be zero, right? I mean, if you have an 8.5% nominal increase and the inflation rate is 8.5%, that's a real increase of 0%, right?
It is, and I would add to that, when we were planning for, in the FY21 budget, we were in the COVID, in the early parts of COVID, and so we limited our growth to 1%. And so if you take FY21 and FY22 and look at them together, that would be an average of about 8 to 9%, and so it's normalized growth across 2 years, and so we're getting back to that normal rate of 2 to 3% this year.
And also last year, we were able, fortunately, to meet our needs, we were able to utilize some excess funds above what's required in our available fund balance. That's not available to us this year, staring into the new fiscal year, correct? Because we did that last year.
We did.
Okay. All right. And also, it looks like here that we're staring at a little over $1 million in additional expenses just from, higher fuel costs, which I think we all can appreciate. Am I reading correctly that that's based on an assumption of $4.75 a gallon?
It is.
Okay. So, I've heard, we all have seen the talk. I mean, what if it's $5 a gallon or $6 a gallon this summer? That would end up being an even higher expense, correct?
It would.
Okay.
Mr. Williams, I point out that the price of diesel right now is substantially over $5 a gallon.
Yeah. And a lot of our vehicles use diesel. So, also, I'd like to point out, it looks like, I know general county government is often a convenient target for some, but it looks like in the proposed county manager's budget, education gets a pretty generous, I'd say in this environment, a pretty generous increase. Public safety gets a pretty generous increase. Let's see, am I reading correctly that, let's see here, general county government's increase is about 1.4%?
Yes, if you take the general fund and take out schools, SPCC, and EMS.
Okay, and I think you did address this, but just to make sure I'm clear, as part of the regular budget discipline, that the county manager's office does every year, what is it that you ask of departments under your authority to do, just so everybody in the public can understand, in terms of regular public discipline, budget discipline?
Right off the top, we asked for a 2% return on their current allocated funds. So, cut 2%. And that's where we start the budgeting process for the departments. And that has generally been the case, at least for the last 3.5 years, 4 years. Programs that are funded today may be short-term programs, and they may not be around next year. That does not mean that the funding for that program needs to remain in that budget. So we pull that back and we look at where that needs to be reinvested, if so, or offset additional costs to other places in the organization.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Sure.
Any other questions? Are there any questions for the county manager or any comments from him?
I don't have any other comments today, Mr. Chairman. We look forward to the public hearing and then eventual adoption of the budget. Thank you.
Thank you. If nothing else, I'll make a motion to adjourn. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank y'all. Blake, I need to ask you a question.